Hi everybody, welcome to Google Sas Office Hours. My name is Ethan Gracer. I'm a customer engineer on the Google CBRS team. My role is to help our customers understand how our SaaS works, troubleshoot any technical issues, and more broadly provide context and guidance for using CBRS. Today's session will be 30 to 50 minutes. I'll spend about 10 to 20 of those minutes discussing the different certificates in the CBRS ecosystem and what you should know about them. You'll notice that there's a chat window to the right of this video. Please feel free to ask questions as I give the presentation, keeping in mind that questions are viewable by everyone who's watching. Your questions don't have to be about the presentation topic. Anything about the SAS or CBRS is fair game. And once I've finished my 10 to 20 minute presentation, we'll spend the rest of the time answering questions that appear in the chat. I'll do my best to get to every question before the time is up, but if I don't get to your question, or if any other questions come to mind after office hours have finished, you can always refer to our help center at support.google.com/SAS, or reach out to us for support at sas-support@google.com. And you can find both of those links, the link and the email listed in the chat right now. Okay, let's start talking about certificates. Oh, and in advance, I apologize if the quality of the presentation is a bit lower this week than usual, but all of Google is operating in a work from home situation because of the coronavirus, so hopefully my internet is fast enough to get this out to everybody. Okay, so what is a certificate? I'm sure that most people watching this know, but I just want to give a brief overview for those who are less familiar with them. A certificate is really just an encoded text file, right? It just has information on. It has an encryption key inside of it and some details, which I'll show in the next slide. But really, the purpose of a certificate is to verify the authenticity of a message. And so when the Win Forum was creating specifications for the SAS, they decided that they wanted to ensure authenticity of messages using certificates. And so for connectivity purposes, it's very important to get certificates right. So to show an example of what's inside of a certificate, right, once you decode that jumble of characters, there's information like who issued the certificate, right? So that would be like your certificate provider. Some examples include like Insta or DigiCert, Curio, right? These are all providers of CBRS root certificates. It has information on who uses the certificate. So that would be you as the end user. Your certificate is specifically assigned for your CBSDs or your domain proxy. And so there's information on who should be using the certificate. And then there's information on the encryption key and the encryption protocol. There are certain protocols that exist so that everyone agrees on the protocols. The SAS and the CBSD can then send messages to each other, encrypt them, decrypt them, and verify them, knowing that everyone's using the same language. It's a very, very brief overview of certificates. It's a very, very dense topic, but just for those, in case anyone isn't aware, that is how they can be used, or what they're for, rather. Now we're going to talk about how they can be used. And there are essentially three kinds of certificates that you need to be aware of. The first kind is the CA, or Certificate Authority Root Certificate. And this is a certificate that's generated by your certificate authority, and it's provided to everybody. And this certificate is really just used to verify that another certificate was issued by that certificate authority. So why do we need this? So our SAS has a certificate that's issued by a certificate authority. When your CBSD connects to the SAS, your CBSD wants to know that this is a legitimate SAS, that we aren't some malicious user who's telling you, oh yeah, we have a SAS, and then we just write some backend application that collects a whole bunch of information about your device, right? You want to know that Google that you are only connecting to Google Sas. And so that CBSD needs a way to check that our Sas certificate is a legitimate certificate. And so that's why your CBSDs need to have the root certificate installed as roots of trust on the device itself. The device has to verify when it sends a network request to the Sas is who it claims to be. Similarly, and this takes us into the second column, when your CBSD connects directly to the Sas, the CBSD or the Sas needs to confirm that your CBSD has been FCC certified and is permitted to operate under Part 96 rules. And so when your device vendor receives certification from the FCC, that device vendor then goes to one of these certificate authorities with the proof that they have certified their device. And then the certificate authority issues them a certificate specifically for that device that our Sas will recognize and accept. So the CBSD or domain proxy certificate is something that your device vendor or your domain proxy provider should already have in place for you. There should be no action that you have to take here. And actually the same is true for the CA root certificate. The root certificates for all of the WinForum CAs should be installed on the devices that you're using to connect to the Sas. Now, when you tried to connect to the Sas, if you get issues that report problems with establishing an SSL connection, or if you're getting like a 403 error, which is a typical error for authentication issues, then you probably want to reach out to your device manufacturer to confirm with them that the correct certificates are installed on their device. The third kind of certificate that we have is a CPI certificate, and this is one that all of you are probably very familiar with. So the CPI certificate is given to certified professional installers who need to verify the installation parameters on a CBSD when it's installed. And the reason that WinForum requires CPIs is to ensure the integrity of the system, right? We need to know that when someone says, I put a radio in this location at this height and I'm transmitting at this power, that the information is accurate, because the Sas is using that information in order to make sure that we don't interfere with any higher priority users. And so that CPI certificate is actually issued by one of the WinForum root CAs, but you receive it from your training program administrator. And you provide it to the Sas to prove to the Sas that you have received the right training and that you can verify that the certificate you can verify that you've passed the training and you are permitted to enter device parameters into the Sas. Okay, so how do you acquire these certificates should you need to? Again, I want to emphasize that really your device vendor should have acquired the top 2 certificates for you, but different vendors have different policies, and it's quite possible that you might have to acquire some of these certificates yourself. And I have included links. Both of these links in the slide are in the chat to your right, so you don't have to manually type them in and go look at them. But the first one, the CA root certificate, these are publicly available certificates. They're on WinForum's website. You just go to the top link on the slide, and you can download the root certificates for every certificate authority that WinForum has approved. And you do need to install every CA root certificate as a root of trust on each CBSD or each instance of the domain proxy. And that's so that your CBSD can recognize certificates from any of the providers. The second one, the CBSD and domain proxy certificate, I mentioned earlier, those are issued by the same operators from the first link. But you only need to get a certificate from one of them, right? I mentioned for the root certificates, you need to download one for every provider. But to get a CBSD or a domain proxy certificate, you only need to speak to one provider and ask them to issue you that certificate. And you will have to demonstrate that your device has passed FCC certification in order to obtain that certificate. And the last certificate is a CPI certificate, and these are issued by CPI training programs. There are several of them on the market. Google does offer one, and we're happy to answer questions about our CPI training now or over email via support. But there are other companies offering training programs as well, and I've included a link in the chat so that you can go and see who all of the providers are. And so that's how you acquire each of these kinds of certificates. And I think that's everything that I have for today. I'm definitely here to take your questions. This is, your time to have my undivided attention and to ask whatever questions about CBRS or Google SAS or CPI training that you may have. So I'm happy to stick around and answer whatever questions or comments you may have. And feel free to drop some questions into the chat on the right whenever you're ready. See, we're getting a question from the Chicago Crown team. How does Google SAS keep up to date with certificates from the authority and vendor OEM? That's a great question. So certificates have a built-in mechanism for validation, and so the certificate authority basically keeps a live link that's available to all of the SaaS providers, where each time that we check a certificate, we verify against that link that the certificate is still valid. So certificate authorities can revoke certificates, or they could reissue certificates, which would invalidate an older version of the certificate. So our SaaS is constantly checking against those revocation lists to make sure that the certificates that we're looking at are valid. In terms of how the SaaS keeps up to date with certificates, I think the most important piece to understand is that there isn't necessarily a time bound, or there is a time bound on them. Each certificate expires over the course of 5 years, I believe. But when new certificates are issued, we're checking the expiration dates of those certificates to make sure that they're still valid. So it's we don't have to have a comprehensive list of every certificate that's been issued in order to verify a certificate. We just need to check any new certificate that we see that we haven't verified before. We need to check that certificate against the root CA certificate to make sure that this certificate was actually issued by a WinForum certificate authority. And this all happens behind the scenes. Every time that you send a registration request, a grant request, a spectrum inquiry request, a heartbeat request, every single time that you make a connection, we are verifying that the certificate is still valid. If that doesn't answer your question, feel free to ask a follow-up one. I see we have another question from George. How and where can a Google CPI recover or generate a new certificate if the private key or password was forgotten? This is a great question. So if you have any issues with your certificates, then you are able to email us at cpi-training@google.com, and I'm going to paste that in the chat now. And we can issue you a new certificate only if you took our training program, right? If you took a different training program for your CPI training, then you have to reach out specifically to your training program. So that's the general answer, right? It's the training program has to issue your certificate or reissue your certificate. Now, it is really important when you receive your CPI certificate and your CPI password that you securely save both the certificate file and the password, because you cannot change that password once the certificate is issued. And if you lose it, then we have to generate you a new certificate, and that incurs at least a 24-hour delay before you can register devices, because we have to submit the new CPI registration to WinForum, and WinForum has to update their CPI database, and then the SAS has to download the new version of that CPI database, and that whole procedure can take 24 to 48 hours. Typically, it's 24. But I definitely recommend that you make sure if it's happened once or twice and you've lost track of the certificate or the password, I would really encourage you to find a secure storage option. Maybe if your company uses a password manager, that would be a good place to put it. Some password managers now allow you to store files. You can actually save the .p12 file inside of a secured password manager. But you definitely don't want to lose track of either of those. If you can help it, it'll just make your installation process a lot smoother. Second question from George: is there a place in WinForum or other where you can look up CPIs? George, if you could clarify what you would like to look up about CPIs, I may be able to better answer this. There is a public database for CPIs, but it only includes the CPI identifier, so the CPIR ID. And so for Google CPIs, it's the ID that starts GOOG dash and then a number. So that number and the public key associated with that CPI is publicly available, but none of the names, phone numbers, emails, all of that's information that we collect about CPIs is not publicly available, as it should not be. And so if you want to look up if somebody is a CPI, I don't know that I'm honestly not sure that there is a way to do that. I think that the idea is that operators who want to use CBRS will themselves take the CPI training and receive a certificate, and then maybe somebody in the certificate or some people in the company or several people in the company have CPI certificates, so that there's some redundancy in there for operators. But there isn't like a database where you can look up someone who's a CPI to hire them per se. If someone advertises, on some networking website that they are a CPI, you can certainly, hire them. But that is, I don't think there's a way to look up, my company wants to hire a third-party CPI. How do I do that? I'm not sure that that's a solved issue yet, actually. Hi, Lamberto. So question about what we can expect as new features coming soon. So some of the new things that we have in the pipeline, one is support for managing deployments, or kind of grouping your deployments into what we call nodes and network deployments. So, if you have CBSDs that are deployed in multiple regions, or maybe you have CBSDs from different device vendors, and you have different people managing different sets of CBSDs based on region or device vendor or some other category. What we're getting set up to do is to be able to say, okay, well, if person A only manages uh, devices in Alabama and person B only manages devices in Mississippi, then those two, then you as the SaaS portal administrator will be able to assign uh, a set of devices to each user so that users only see the devices that they specifically manage. And then, if you have like a higher level person, like the actual administrator, the actual technical administrator for the business who wants to see all of the devices across all of the regions where uh, the company has devices, then they'll be able to log into the SaaS portal and see everything. So that's the key. That's one of the bigger requests that we've had, and we are very excited to release that. I believe we're trying to push out the initial release in the next couple of weeks. And that release, in order to create nodes, you'll have to be set up with the SaaS Portal API, but you'll be able to view them inside the SaaS Portal. And then with future releases, we'll start adding in the ability to create those nodes in the user interface and to manage them in the user interface as well. The other big feature that we're working on, which we're hoping to have ready in Q2, is the kind of first step for implementing coexistence, where the SaaS is going to sort channels in the spectrum inquiry response based on which channels we think are going to be most or have the least interference. Specifically, we're going to look at how many CBSDs are deployed in the area. Does this channel have any incumbent users nearby? And so the power might be limited on this channel when it's less limited on another channel. Those are all things, kind of simple factors that we're working on just to make it easier for devices to choose a channel. Right now, the Spectrum Inquiry Response just lists everything from 3550 to 3570 in order. So in this change, we'll sort that list based on what we as the SaaS believe will be the clearest channel. So yeah, I would say those are the two big things that we're looking to release in the near future. We do also have a revamp of our user interface in progress. So as we have more information about that, we'll start talking about it. We think that's going to be a really good and helpful change. So another question from Lamberto: what's the capacity of CBSDs that Google SaaS can handle, and how many does it have today? In terms of capacity, we have load tested to many thousands of devices. I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but we believe that we have the capacity for the near and short-term, at least short-term, medium-term future of the CBRS ecosystem, and we're always keeping an eye on our system to make sure that we're handling all of the requests that we're getting, that we're not seeing any increased latency for requests as our numbers continue to grow. This is, I think, one of the big benefits of being in the Google ecosystem is Google as a company has such vast experience managing products that scale to billions of users, right? And the Google SaaS is literally running on the same infrastructure that powers something like Gmail or Google Docs or Google Maps, right? And these are products that handle incredible load without going down. So we are, constantly monitoring to make sure that we're scaling our system appropriately. I don't have specific numbers to share with you right now, If you're interested in that information, you can definitely send us an email at sas-support@google.com, and we can look into what numbers we'd be able to share. But yeah, we have. I can safely say that we have a wide variety of customers in different markets. We have many devices deployed all over the U.S. And we believe that we believe that there's going to be continued growth, and we're excited to see where that goes. Does a CBSD, a Category B, have to be recertified for every external antenna that is used? This is a good question. We have gotten this question many times in the recent past. Our understanding is that a CBSD is certified either as a Category A or as a Category B, or potentially as both, and that the FCC certification is based specifically on the antenna that is used when the device is certified. So if a device is certified with multiple, like if a device is submitted multiple times with different antennas for FCC certification, then that would be fine. But I don't believe that just because you're using an external antenna that's less than the gain of the antenna already certified, that necessarily means you're okay. That's a question. That's a question for either the FCC or the Wireless Innovation Forum. And if you need that, if you are interested in connecting with Google's kind of CBRS policy team about kind of what the unwritten rules are around certifying those CBSDs with kind of lower powered antennas relative to certification. Again, definitely shoot us an email, and I'm happy to check in with our policy teams on kind of what we believe is the intention of this regulations. This is CBRS is definitely still a new industry, or a newer industry with newer rules, and we're finding little gaps in areas where the rules aren't super clear, and so we are constantly working with WinForum to help add clarity to those rules, make new rules that make sense, change old rules that maybe don't make sense or as much sense as we thought they would at the time. So we are very much in constant communication with WinForum to make sure that we're enabling like the best possible CBRS ecosystem, and those conversations are constantly changing. So to give you a definitive answer, I definitely would want to check in with kind of the policy experts on our team, and that's not so much my domain. Generally speaking, at least for now, until we have a definitive answer from our policy team, I would encourage you only to use the antenna that was certified by the FCC. All right, everybody, I think that's going to be the end of our office hours session today. Thank you for tuning in. Definitely open to any feedback you may have. If there are ways that we can make the session more useful to you, or if there are specific topics you'd like us to cover in office hours, please send us a note at sas-support@google.com, and we will take your advice into consideration and think about how we can provide a better experience for your CBRS needs with Google. Hope everybody is hanging in there with all the coronavirus stuff. Stay safe out there, and we will speak to you next week. Have a good weekend, everybody.